The UN have today, this morning, announced that, as far as they're concerned, the entirety of the population of Gaza are living in famine conditions. This is the 21st century. We're watching on live television people starving to death and children dying for lack of anaesthetics when they need that to have operations to, in some cases, amputate limbs. It's a 10-minute rule bill, which means I have 10 minutes to introduce the bill, and what it is requiring is that Parliament establishes an independent inquiry into British policy in relation to Israel and the Middle East on the supply of arms, on the diplomatic exchanges, and what reference has been made to the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court. Because I am very concerned about the supply of arms to Israel, the supply of components for the F35 jets, and those jets are bombing Gaza, killing children, where now there is famine across the whole of Gaza, and I think the role of Britain in all this needs to be examined. We did the same on the Iraq War when we introduced the Sir John Chilcot inquiry eventually, and Sir John Chilcot took a long time to undertake that inquiry, but it came out with some pretty devastating stuff about the way the government of the day had ignored legal advice and legal opinion and taken us into an illegal war.
The Foreign Secretary says that it's only components that we're supplying to these F-35s. Would you say that the government are underplaying our role in the arms that we're supplying to Israel?
15% of all the parts of an F-35 jet are made in this country. At one stage, under pressure, the government said it would no longer supply parts directly to Israel. But later, under pressure from me and others, they said, well, actually, these parts go into the global supply chain, therefore Israel could buy them within the global supply chain. Yes, we are supplying parts to the F-35 jet, which is bombing hospitals, schools and people's homes.
What's the intent with today's bill? In layman's terms, for the common man, what does it actually mean? Could it actually change a position that the government currently holds?
It's part of political pressure on the government. It's under the 10-minute rule procedure. It's very unlikely to become law unless it received more or less unanimous support. Now, obviously, the government is not going to support this particular bill. But I want us to give MPs the opportunity to vote on this bill, saying that they actually think there should be an inquiry into what government policy actually is. And I am putting it forward for that reason. This is part of a process of holding our government to account over supply of arms and the devastating effect of the bombardment on particularly the children of Gaza.
One of the cornerstones of the government spokesman's lines at the moment is that they need to ensure that aid is getting into the region. And we've heard overnight that Israel are now blocking some people from receiving aid in Gaza. Do you think the government are putting enough pressure on the Israeli government to ensure that aid gets in?
No, they're not putting anything like enough pressure because Israel has effectively prevented the UN Relief and Works Agency from delivering aid. It's prevented the UN Food Programme from delivering aid which could be distributed independently of any government by UNRWA. And they're saying they will distribute the aid via their own system, which is a private enterprise system. And they've now been revealed as bombing and shooting people on their way to pick up aid from the limited number of aid distribution points, all of which are in the southern end of the Gaza Strip. So if you're at the northern end of the Gaza Strip, it's impossible to get to where the food is being supplied, even though it's trucked in from the northern end of the Gaza Strip in the first place. But there isn't enough as it is. And the UN have today, this morning, announced that, as far as they're concerned, the entirety of the population of Gaza are living in famine conditions. This is the 21st century. We're watching on live television people starving to death and children dying for lack of anaesthetics when they need that to have operations to, in some cases, amputate limbs.
On the other side of that, we've heard from the White House, Catherine Leavitt, who is the spokesperson for the president, has said that the BBC has been biased in its coverage of the Israel-Gaza conflict, and it said that it has been too on the side of Hamas and the people of Gaza. Would you agree with that?
I'm not sure she's in a position to make any judgment on what the BBC's coverage is one way or the other. I would suggest that her job ought to be to ensure the US stops supplying weapons to Israel and the US does everything it can to bring about a meaningful ceasefire so that people in Gaza can eat. I think the media as a whole have not been very good in reporting this conflict, have been very slow to pick up on the bombardment that's also going on the West Bank, and the attacks that have gone on in the Jenin camp in the West Bank as well.
Would you say it was a mistake to have signed that, de facto US-UK trade deal a couple of weeks ago, knowing that the US is not going to intervene in Gaza anytime soon?
We don't have that many points of leverage around the world. We're not the world's biggest country, despite what some people think. And one of the points of leverage would be on trade deals. So why did we sign a deal with the US without putting any conditions on about supply of aid? Why did we even open negotiations, albeit now suspended apparently, with Israel on an Israel trade agreement at the height of all this conflict, when Israel is not only bombing Gaza and the West Bank, it's also bombing in Syria and Lebanon?
I just wanted to ask you about the strength of public feeling in the UK. Do you think the government are reflective of how people feel towards this conflict at this moment in time?
Their position has moved slightly, but very slowly over the last few months. And if you go back to autumn 23, the government's position was one of basically total support for Israel at that stage. They've been alarmed by the number and the size of the demonstrations. MPs have been spooked by the numbers of their constituents who've been in touch with them demanding action to bring about a ceasefire. And the public opinion shows that it's moved considerably to deep hostility to what Israel is doing and support for the Palestinian people. And I think that is a factor. So slowly public opinion is having some influence, but our inquiry is designed to expose the arms we have supplied, which makes us complicit in illegal actions which have brought about genocidal conditions in Gaza.
If there were to be, one thing that was changed tomorrow regarding this bill, what would it be? The immediate halt of all supply of arms?
End all arms supplies to Israel immediately, and say that we are going to support the Hague Group, which is determined to ensure that the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court decisions are actually carried out.